My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. 25 minutes after the hour. Well, it's no secret there is a great deal going on when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. The reports are that there is a partial ceasefire, not exactly the full ceasefire that President Trump and I think most people were hoping for, but hopefully it results in a little bit of a lessening of the destruction in Ukraine and in Russia. And hopefully it's a good step forward towards a cessation of hostilities. And someone who has followed what's going on in Russia, not just for the last 3 years like the rest of the world, but for the last couple of decades very closely, is Dr. Geoffrey Roberts, historian, biographer, political commentator, and author, whose books include Stalin's Library, A Dictator and His Books. Dr. Roberts, it's great to talk with you again. Thanks for joining me on the radio.
Hi, Frank. Good to talk to you again.
Do you feel the UK is better off without daylight saving time?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. That's a big debate, and I have to say I haven't really got my head around it yet. Yeah, so I'll pass on that one.
All right, you dodging the controversial questions, Dr. Roberts. Let's get to the easy questions like Russia and Ukraine. Now, the perception of your commentary, it's no secret that your analysis and a lot of your commentary is very different from what a lot of mainstream American audiences hear in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Fox News Channel, MSNBC. You've been criticized as being, or described in some quarters, criticized in others, as being sympathetic to Vladimir Putin and Russia. Is that a fair description? And if it's not a fair description, what exactly do you differ with in that description?
Well, I specialize in the study of Russia, I mean, mainly from a historical point of view, but also from the point of view of contemporary politics. And my role is to understand Russia and to convey that understanding to other people. And the crucial point there is to explain what the Russian point of view is. And of course, at the moment, the key thing we need to know is what the Russian point of view is on the war in Ukraine. And that Russian point of view just gets lost in the kind of avalanche of propaganda that you find in the media, the Western media, and also from the mouths of Western politicians. So I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to understand, and sometimes people confuse my efforts at explanation and understanding, with sympathy and empathy with Putin and with the Russian position. But that's not what I'm trying. What I'm trying to do here, in actual fact, my political position on the war is pro-peace. Yeah, it's pro-peace from the very beginning of the war. I've been, doing what little I can to bring the conflict to an end. And if you want, I would actually describe myself as being pro-Ukrainian rather than pro-Russian, because it's Ukraine needs this war to end as soon as possible.
Exactly.
Ukraine has been destroyed by this war, and those people who cheer Ukraine on and want the war to go on, and say you can't make any compromises or concessions, you can't trust Putin, they're not doing Ukrainian people any service here. They're contributing to the ongoing destruction of Ukraine. So that's my fundamental position. That's what my position. My position is, the war needs to end as soon as possible. And of course, as you can imagine, I'm very pleased with the administration in the United States, the Trump administration, about these initiatives they've undertaken in relation to trying to bring the war to an end. And so far, the Trump peace initiative, I would call it, has been going very well.
So, Dr. Roberts, given Putin's seeming refusal to agree to a full ceasefire, do you believe his intentions are genuine, or is this just a stalling tactic to continue gaining ground while appearing to be cooperative? By the way, at 30 minutes after the hour, this is the other side of midnight. What do you make of it, Dr. Roberts? What do you think?
I don't think Putin is stalling. He's not going to do that, because stalling would be an obvious tactic for the Russians, to use, given that things are going very well for them, militarily. They're gaining ground, gaining positions, gaining advantage on the battlefield every day. For Putin to actually use stalling tactics would actually destroy his relations of trust with Trump, and Putin wants to maintain the good relationship he has with President Trump, and he wants to do that because Trump can help him bring the war to an end on satisfactory terms to Russia, and also he's very, very interested in developing a constructive relationship with the United States in a détente with the United States, in collaboration with the United States on all kinds of global issues. So I don't think he's stalling. I think the Russian side is engaging in serious negotiations with the American side, and if those negotiations can be successfully completed, then Putin will be prepared to sign to make the necessary compromise and sign the necessary peace deal. Now, what Putin has made clear all along is that a ceasefire is one thing, a permanent peace deal is another. So his position is that if there is going to be a ceasefire, a full ceasefire, it has to lead to negotiations that will end the conflict completely. So he's not going to agree to any ceasefire unless there's some parameters for the peace negotiations that will follow the ceasefire. Parameters which will protect Russian interests as he sees it. So that's what's going on at the moment. I think the Russians and the Americans are trying to negotiate a package of measures that will satisfy Putin that he can agree to a full ceasefire, and that will lead to a permanent peace. And once they've finished their negotiations, obviously the American side in particular will have to talk to the Ukrainians about them getting to accept whatever deal they come up with the Russians.
It's being said that Putin's demand that Ukraine pause mobilization and rearmament seems deliberately provocative and maybe deliberately unreasonable. Do you see that as an attempt to sabotage peace talks while blaming the Ukrainians?
No, I don't see it that way. And from the Russian point of view, it's a legitimate demand to make, because they don't want to call a ceasefire, and then the Ukrainians just use the breathing space they get from the ceasefire to rebuild their defences, rebuild their armed forces, prior to resuming the conflict. So it makes no sense to have a ceasefire, which is just going to be a prelude to further fighting in the future. Of course, you have to remember, the role that Europe is playing here. And the Europeans, okay, they're talking about peace as well, but in actuality, what the Europeans want to do, they want the war to continue, right? They're saying they're going to continue to arm Ukraine. They're encouraging Ukrainians to fight on. So when the Russians hear those messages, obviously they're going to conclude, why should we facilitate, Europe's rearming of Ukraine? So no, so they want a proper ceasefire, which won't give the Ukrainians any advantage. But of course, the Russians are demanding no mobilization from Ukraine, and cessation of arms deliveries from the West Ukraine. Of course, the Ukrainians, or the Western side, the Americans, they can also make demands from the Russians as well as to how they will implement a full ceasefire. And that, I presume, that's the kind of discussion that the Russians and Americans are having and will continue to have. So I don't think it's still. I'll go back to my point. No, look, Putin is not going to do anything to undermine his relationship with Trump. I'm absolutely certain of that. And stalling tactics, that kind of crude negotiating tactic, that would do that. So no. So I don't think anything the Russians are doing at the moment constitutes stalling. And if you think about it, everything's happening at quite fast speed, isn't it? It's not, at the moment, the whole process is going forward in days rather than weeks or months.
Yeah, no, this is true. If folks are just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We're talking with Dr. Geoffrey Roberts. Dr. Roberts, what are your thoughts on Ukraine's so-called red lines? Do you think they're realistic, or is Kyiv refusing to face the tough geopolitical realities as they are?
Depends which red lines you're thinking about. And it's not clear exactly where those red lines are at the moment because they keep shifting. They're shifting in response to the Trump peace initiative. So it's actually not clear. One of their red lines is that what used to be one of their red lines was that they wouldn't give up under any circumstances their ambition to become a member of NATO. But Putin has made it absolutely clear the one fundamental condition of any ceasefire and peace negotiations is that Ukraine has to agree that it's going to become a neutral state. And Ukrainians seem to have moved away from that position that they want to join NATO. So now they talk about we want a security guarantee. And what they mean is they mean a Western and they mean an American security guarantee. The problem is that the United States under Trump doesn't want to give the kind of security guarantee that they're asking for. Europeans are, but Europeans won't guarantee Ukrainian post-war unless the Americans are involved in it. So that's another. That's another red line, which seems to be crumbling away. I think the fundamental red line that the Ukrainians have, and I don't think they're going to budge from this, is that they're not going to voluntarily give up any more of their territory. I mean, at the moment, the Putin's stated conditions for a ceasefire and then peace negotiations is that Ukraine has to evacuate its military forces from the 4 provinces in eastern and southern Ukraine that Russia claims as its territory. And indeed, Russia has formally incorporated these territories into the Russian Federation. So in June, Putin made a speech. He said, "Look, we can have a ceasefire tomorrow, but 2 things. One is, Ukraine never gets to become a member of NATO, become a neutral state. And secondly, Ukraine has to withdraw its military forces from this Russian territory, the territory that he claims to be Russian." Now, I don't think Ukrainians, under any circumstances, I'll be surprised anyway, will agree to give up voluntarily any more territory. So that's their red line. But I think what they will do in the end, they've got no choice because there's no alternative. They will agree to acquiesce in or accept the continuing Russian occupation of what they consider to be Ukrainian territories, and they'll commit to not trying to retrieve these territories by the use of military force. Now, on the Russian side, what the Russians can give, and this I think will be a key element of any successful negotiation with the Americans, is that Putin can say, okay, we'll keep what we have, but he'll drop his demand that the Ukrainians give up more territory to Russia. Yeah. So basically, Putin will moderate his territorial demand. Yeah? So, I mean, if you can sum up this way, is that on the Russian side, the key red line is security position. Ukraine doesn't become a member of NATO. NATO is out of Ukraine completely. On the Ukrainian side, the key red line is territory. Yeah? Okay, they'll acquiesce in what they've lost so far, but they won't give up any more territory voluntarily. Now, of course, the problem is the more the war goes on, the more territory the Russians are winning on the battlefield. So, from the point of view of the territorial issue, the Ukrainians will be well advised to actually, negotiate a ceasefire and a peace treaty as soon as possible, because that way they're going to actually get to keep, more territory than they would if they keep delaying. And by the way, you asked the question about Putin and delaying, and I said, no, he's not delaying. I don't think he is. If there's any side that's delaying here, it's the Ukrainian side, and it's also the Europeans. They're the ones who are trying to delay, disrupt this process because they want the war to go on. I just hope the Ukrainians are going to come to their senses, accept that they've lost the war, and that Trump is their best hope. The United States is their best hope to get the best possible deal in this situation.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
I'm Cyndi Lauper. My psoriasis was all over, even on my scalp, which may mean 4 times the risk for psoriatic arthritis. But Cosentyx works on both.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at Cosentyx.com or 1-844-COSENTYX. Ask your doctor about Cosentyx.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Hi, this is Javon, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep. I'm here to help with everything from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
No problem. I can even help schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Whatever you need.
So the first room we're looking at is for...
Shop Blinds.com now and get up to 50% off with minimum purchase. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Let me ask you about President Trump's role in this whole thing. President Trump's handling of the situation has drawn criticism from a number of sides. Some people say he's being too soft on Putin. Others claim he's acting as a much-needed deal maker. Where do you stand on Trump's approach here? What do you think about it?
I think it's been brilliant. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. Look, Trump hasn't given anything to Putin that he doesn't have already. Yes, that Russia hasn't won as a result of winning not just the war with Ukraine, but the proxy war with NATO. So what Trump has been doing very successfully, he's been providing Putin with incentives to ceasefire. to negotiate a peace settlement in which Russia will make concessions and compromises, as well as the Ukraine. So that's what he's been. And also, he's holding out the possibility of a longer-term collaboration between the United States and Russia. So and that incentives approach, that carrot approach, if you like, has worked. It's worked, and Putin and the Russian side are responding. So I think it's been. I mean, at the same time, he's also obviously been putting pressure on Ukrainians, hasn't he? Because obviously the United States doesn't have a lot of leverage over Russia, but they do have some leverage, considerable leverage over Ukraine. So he's been putting pressure on the Ukrainian side, and he's forced the Ukrainians to accept a 30-day ceasefire, and then also to accept this partial ceasefire at the present time. So I think. I don't know whether it's by accident or design, but I think the Trump has played a brilliant hand so far in relation to the Ukraine war.
The Biden administration was heavily criticized for giving Ukraine a blank check approach to military support. Do you think that President Trump's more transactional diplomacy is ultimately going to yield better results?
Well, the Biden administration strategy, of course, has been a failure, isn't it? It's failed.
Right. Well,
I mean, Russia is winning and will win the war in Ukraine, and Ukraine has been partially destroyed as a result of the war. It's facing huge problems into the future, and huge amounts of not just money but prestige have been poured into the war by the Biden administration, and it's all what it's done is just prolonged a conflict that could have been ended before it started, had there been a serious security negotiation with Russia before Putin voted, and could have ended a few weeks after it began. In the Istanbul peace negotiations, had the United States got behind those peace negotiations, and what was on offer in Istanbul by the Russians was far, far more favourable to Ukraine than what's on offer now. So the whole Biden approach has been a complete failure. I do think that Trump's more, you say, transactional, I would say realistic and pragmatic approach is much better, and it's actually working. I mean, the Trump administration has changed the whole discussion, hasn't it, about the Ukraine war in the United States, as far as I can see, and also everywhere in Europe. Now the discussion is all about peace, isn't it? How can we, not about winning the war or standing by Ukraine, for as long as it takes, all that kind of rhetoric. Now it's all about how can we achieve peace? Isn't it? That's what the discussion is all about. So I don't know what you would want to call that, transactional. It strikes me as being very commonsensical. Given the reality.
I'm thinking. I was thinking in the formulation of that question about the mineral deal, which was just a very different approach from what we'd seen in Ukraine. But your point's well taken. Can I just
say about the mineral deal? I think that's a bit of political theatre. I don't think it's in practical terms too important. The Ukrainians don't control much of these minerals. I mean, a lot of them are in Russian occupied territories of Ukraine. So I think that's a bit of political theatre by Trump. But I think obviously he's also trying to. Again, it's about forcing the Ukrainians to come to terms with the reality of their situation. So it's a symbolic concession, which and it's leading to other concessions in the future. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, I make the case, and I have been for years now, in favor of a negotiated settlement, a diplomatic end to this, and the recognition that those Donbas republics are never going to be a part of Ukraine again, and neither is Crimea. And ultimately, there's always a caller or sometimes a guest or sometimes somebody that writes to me and says, well, doesn't that incentivize Russia to invade other countries when it wants more territory or more resources? Or doesn't it send the message to any other country that you can go and invade, your neighbor, and the United States is going to sit back and let it happen? Speak to that concern, which I'm sure you've heard many more times than I have, which if you let Putin and Russia get away with this, they're just going to keep doing this again and again.
Well, I mean, I always respond to that. One thing I respond to that is like, if you want to incentivize aggression even further, you just continue with the war. Because you continue with the war, Russia is going to get even more territory, right, even more successful in relation to war. And if the argument is that success, Russian success, is an incentivization to do other things, then yeah, sure, continue the war and they'll do even more. Yeah. So, but the main point is this: is that look, there is no reason, there's no evidence to suppose that Putin and the Russians have any ambitions, territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine. From going back to what I was saying earlier, I specialize in Russia. I try to see things from the Russian point of view. From the Russian point of view, I'm not saying I agree with this or whatever, but from the Russian point of view, the war in Ukraine is a defensive war. In defense of Russian security situation, and also a war, to defend people in Ukraine, Ukrainians who speak Russian or identify with Russia, right? So it's a defensive war. It's a limited war, right? And once Russia, Putin, achieves its goals in relation to Ukraine, that will be it. Once Ukraine agrees to neutrality and all the other aspects of the peace agreement are accepted, then Putin will have no reason or no incentive to either make demands on Ukraine or else. So this whole idea of Putin being an expansionist and imperialist is just completely wrong. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. But look, I mean, I can say that, and people can say no, that you're wrong, and this, that, and the other. The only way we're going to find out, answer this question about Putin's ultimate intentions is in practice, right? By actually ending the war in Ukraine, having a ceasefire, having an agreement, and then we can actually see how it goes and see what happens. And I'm confident that these scaremongering scenarios about further Russian expansion in Europe, attacks on the Baltic states, or whatever it might be, are not going to materialize.
Final question, sir, in the last minute that we have here. In our first conversation, I appreciated that you pointed out the absurdity of all the folks that make the Neville Chamberlain analogy when it comes to Putin and wanting diplomacy here. I'm wondering, taking into effect your career as a historian, do you see any parallels between this drawn-out conflict and past European wars or diplomatic failures? Something tells me that you have a broader historical perspective than simply mentioning only World War II when it comes to this current conflict.
Yeah, well, obviously World War II is my thing as a historian, and there is absolutely no comparison between appeasement in Munich, Chamberlain, all that kind of thing. Putin is not Hitler. And the key thing about Putin is, look, Hitler didn't want to be appeased. He wanted war. He wanted world war. That was his worldview. Putin wanted and wants to be appeased. He wanted to appease before he invaded Ukraine. He wanted a settlement to avert that eventuality. He's been wanting to appease for the last 3 years. He wants to be appeased now, right? So Putin is actually an appeaser himself, yes, and he wants the war to come to an end on terms that satisfy Russia's security goals. And once he gets those terms, the war will come to an end. There is absolutely no comparison whatsoever between Putin and Hitler. It's as simple as that.
Dr. Geoffrey Roberts, I really appreciate the time. And if people want to check out Stalin's Library, A Dictator and His Books, a very, very thoughtful look into the books that Stalin was reading. It's available on Amazon and most other places books are sold. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. I hope we could talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Hey, if you want to comment on any portion of our discussion or anything else for that matter for 15 seconds, I'll give you 15 seconds right now. 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.